I want to thank everyone for attending tonight here in the monastery and also in the Zendo, also on Zoom, and for your continued participation in this community by meditating and studying, and also by helping us financially in whatever way you can. You've been doing that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you can, please continue to do that. So this evening's talk is titled The Predicament of Depression. And where that's coming from, that the predicament is a common word. You all know what that is. It's like a predicament. We don't know what the hell to do with it. In depression, if you have an emotional dynamic that's happening with you, that it's just and negative feelings or useless feelings or feelings that nothing is working right, or on and on, all kinds of things can show up that way. And we might have 15 or 20 people, all there would refer to what they're having as depression. And they could be completely different. Could be chemical imbalance that has to be addressed through medications, through seeing a doctor, possibly a therapist, psychiatrist, your regular general practitioner. You know what I'm saying. So that kind of goes without saying, but I want to say it anyway, because I'm not saying here that everybody who gets depressed should meditate. You could, if you have that kind of negative stuff, you could start with that. You don't have to get in your car. You have a room, have a floor probably, and if not, well, that's another predicament. But you could start with that perhaps, but then you may need a therapist. You may need a psychiatrist. You may, all so many different things can be the underlying area there. But it also could possibly be addressed by just sitting down, holding still, and watching what the mind is doing, rather than laying a bunch of ideas and guesswork and speculation on top of it, and also rather than necessarily going to all the different drugs. Probably close to a dozen, you said earlier, different drugs, maybe more than that, that address that, and some have pretty good results that are able to do that. I had a meditation student over 20 years ago up in Minneapolis that just couldn't sit, couldn't meditate. He came and talked a little bit. We had some interviews, and then he was prescribed Prozac, and he came back. You would think it's some kind of jackpot or something. He was just so excited to just be able to sit down and hold still and just meditate, because Prozac had actually helped him slow down enough that he could actually sit still and observe the flow of his mind. So who knows how that's going to show up. There's so many different ways. But I would encourage you to, if this rings a bell for you, or something is happening in your own mind stream that way, spend a lot of time on the cushion. I'm speaking from my own experience of going through things like this when I was quite a bit younger. Just hold still and receive that stuff that comes up that we want to leave and call something. We want to leave it and get away from it and try to change it, try to cover it up, go to all different kinds of remedies for that. So it's a predicament, because we can't really see any off switch to it. And having been a meditation instructor, not a Dharma teacher like I presume to function as today, since about the last 15 years or so. But before then, 1978, I was trained as a meditation instructor in the Vajradhatu, in the Shambhala and Vajradhatu tradition, under the guidance of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. Trained by him to teach meditation. So I did that for many, many years, but did not function as one's personal spiritual mentor necessarily. I was just another Sangha member, tried to be helpful. So I guess I'm saying you could try that if you do have that kind of disturbance that you would refer to as depression. You could try just sitting still and watching the dynamic, because anytime the body is in motion, because the body mind are so not separate from each other, that the motion of the body can help to cover up what needs to be observed with the consciousness, with the awareness, which you hear me rant about all the time, because it's so easy to just find something else. And just telling yourself a story about it will give you some relief, just knowing who's causing it. I'm feeling this way. It's because of him or her or them or that, or how I was treated when I was 14, what someone did to me. And it's not that, as you've heard me say hundreds of times, it's not that isn't relatively true, but just knowing that cause is not necessarily, you're again, necessarily going to help you move beyond that particular glitch or that particular passage of your life that doesn't seem to have an exit to it. I'm happy to address some questions around that if you have them. We can go take that a lot of different directions, but I'd start with that. I have a few more things to say, but I think they will show up as we perhaps go into questions. Please, especially from anyone who is functioning as a counselor, as you are. So if have some questions for me around that.
Divine, do you see a difference between, say, depression and anxiety? Valen?
Well, is there probably a dictionary definition? Depression.
But from a meditation perspective.
I think it's very similar stuff. Anxiety, depression is more of the being tamped down by something, and I think it's more of a being kind of waterlogged by something. It's been my experience, and then anxiety is more of the anxious about not knowing what's going to happen, or about uncertainty about anything, about today, tomorrow, this afternoon, or interaction with people. Anxiety about being around groups of people, or anxiety about being completely alone and having no one to talk to or call on, or no real support, no one who understands you or what you're going through. Anxiety there more.
Divine, do you see a difference in terms of recommending meditation with someone who has a depressed mood? It's more of a state of mind versus a brain chemical imbalance.
So if they came to me and I talked to them, I would have to get to know them a little bit. I would recommend meditation. I don't think it's going to hurt them. But if they continue to have some kind of difficulty, then as you know, people have been meditators that you've eventually talked to them as a therapist, and other people in the community have sent you as a therapist. And
Kelly and Kelly.
Kelly Klein is a therapist, and Kelsey is also a therapist. So we have several in our community who are meditators and are also therapists. And so I just think it's so situational, and it's very hard to see. Some people have no idea to hear that word, and they might want to meditate. They might be inspired by the teachings of Buddhism or other teachings, and might want to practice meditation, but not really have any strong feeling of what depression wouldn't even use that word on themselves at all, although they might have negative feelings and moods and so on, but never would go and call it something like depression. There's some kind of consensus around that word, and I'm sure all of us have been exposed to that a little bit. There seems to be some kind of consensus around it, yet there's not a fundamental underlying thing that, well, that's caused by this or that's caused by that. Anything else on this? Excuse me.
Just, can you, like the gentleman, I think it was a gentleman that started with Prozac, could that have been like a stepping stone so that it allowed him to start meditating?
Oh, completely. That's exactly what I was saying. That he came to the Shambhala Center in Minneapolis, and we had an interview, and he just was quite nervous and so on. And just said he tried to meditate, and he just couldn't. He just too upset. And I said, well, just do the best you can. Sit down for, some of you heard me say before, sit down for 3 or 4 minutes. Make it a strong form. Strike the bell if you have one. Strike a water glass with a spoon, and at least hold still for 3 or 4 minutes. And then make that form very strong. And then get up and do whatever. But get something started so you're actually addressing that situation a little bit. He was able to do some of that, but once going to, I think it was his therapist, his doctor, whomever prescribed that, he started doing that. And he actually would come and sit for a whole hour with the rest of the community. Would actually sit just to see if there's any other thing around it. I don't remember the gentleman's name. This has been 25 years ago. I haven't heard from him since.
By kind of on the other end of the spectrum, I've seen a lot of medication overprescribed.
Mm-hmm.
if that's a solution, many doctors will ask maybe 2 or 3 questions and determine that there's depression and prescribe a medication.
Interesting.
How do you suggest to work with that?
So the only credential I have is not much, being a monk, but having many, many years of experience working with not only with people who are meditating, but I can't presume to be a doctor or a therapist. I don't function in that way at all. So I would say you just have to trust yourself. I wouldn't necessarily turn the whole thing over to the doctor, nor would I turn it all over to a meditation instructor or a guru. You need to get your own authority for this. My experience being really old and having health problems for the last 20 some years, going to doctors and so on, I've had really difficult stuff happen, especially at the VA, where I was being ignored in different ways and my life did not come to an end, but I was not getting the greatest help there. Not that they do have good health. I don't mean to run down the VA hospital, the Veterans Administration altogether, but it's pretty uneven. Let's put it that way. It's uneven there. Some of it's great, others is lacking. So coming back to your question, I would just say, get help and get, what do they call this? Get the second opinion situation. If the doctor is just asking you a few questions and all of a sudden putting you on a medication right away, I wouldn't look at the side effects of that if there are some. Don't have a lot of experience in that. Go ahead.
What about another similar question? Many of the medications have side effects. How do you figure out if you're getting any benefit for the cost of the side effect?
And it's just about, I could stop giving a talk and we could start just having a conversation about it, because everybody's probably has some kind of activity with medicine and doctors and pharmacies and it's so incredibly complicated. And I'm quite a number of medications myself. I don't know how much I'm being compromised, even mentally. Maybe I'm up here thinking I'm teaching the Dharma and you're all thinking, he's such a nice fellow. We'll just let him go on and think he's teaching us. We'll just continue to act like students. He'll be out of here pretty soon. We'll get a real teacher. Is that happening? Well, you know what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it's a lot of speculation around that. And your question is great, but I don't have any response to it other than, and it's not a solution. It's just a way of working with it. Train your mind so that they're less likely to buy into or believe your thoughts and emotions, reactions and judgments based on hope and fear, and your mind is clear so you can actually look at any given situation, whether it's a doctor telling you something. Recently went to a neurologist that 20 years ago, I would have believed everything that neurologist said, because he has the credential and is a doctor. But not this time. He actually, when I were there together, what was it? He prescribed some things for me to do. He never found out, I never knew that my issue that I was having with this intense sunburn thing all over me was due to the side effect of Ozempic, which I don't know of anybody taking Ozempic who had that problem. But I did. I stopped using it. I just stopped using it, and that side effect went away. And then, of course, the reason for Ozempic is it helps diabetics lose weight and use less insulin. Of course, my insulin and my weight immediately went up. So that's just anecdotally. That's anyone could probably come up with ideas or experiences like that are similar. And that doctor I went to was a neurologist. That was the reason we were going there, wasn't it? Thanks for the memory. What happened? He wanted to electrocute me, wasn't that it? Thought that would be the solution. Isn't that what they do when they stick all those electrodes on you and turn up the voltage to find out if your nerves are working? But isn't it a little bit odd that someone wouldn't just want to run voltage through you to see if it hurt or not? Anyway, we didn't go there. Very nice fellow, though. Just behind the credential. So I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent unless you'd like to hear about my arthritis. I'd be happy to tell you all about that. So let's take it back to that. Is there any questions about something that I would be able to talk about relative to sitting practice meditation can address that, but there are areas, of course, chemical, the mind, the body that are there that meditation isn't necessarily going to solve that, or just your awareness around that might be up against a bigger blockade of chemicals and so on. Yes.
Beyond bowing, if I'm what may be called or recognized as depressed, it's hard to do anything. It's hard to do a lot of things. And so if I'm adding on meditation and I can't seem to do that either, it's as if it makes my whole situation worse. And
may not be able to. The way I worked with the fellow I was talking about was to get him to ask him to just do a little bit and try to make it a strong form. Sit down, hold still, strike a glass or a bell if you have one, and just stay there, just hold very still for 3 or 4 minutes. Usually somebody can do a little bit of that. And something about doing that, sitting down and holding that form for a short period of time and then ending it, and then going back into the mental difficulty, the quandary or the depression. And then that gives you a little bit of a contrast so that you can begin to see, is there some kind of awareness function here that could get a hold of what is arising as and is named or called depression, anxiety, or any of those number of things. But it's just so very complicated. I think Onda was kind of saying that maybe not all of them, but some doctors will maybe interview and ask you a few questions. The next thing they're writing you a script, and you being an RN with a specialty in psychiatric nursing, isn't that true? So you probably run into situations like that. How does it look to you? You've been a meditator for a long time.
how does what look to me? I didn't catch the question.
Is there a question? How does what we're talking about here, the predicament of feeling depressed or anxious or something like that, how does that show up for you? Or in your experience as a nurse?
In my experience, everybody's highly unique, and it seems that listening is important to yourself.
Yeah.
Listening to yourself.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Yes. Choo-choo.
Valley. If we're feeling depressed or miserable, even if we're doing some sitting, it seems like there's still some feeling that we need to do something about it, or there's something that could be changed relatively to make us feel better. How much tension, or can we put some tension in that area to see if we're just making things worse?
I think we can work with it in some way. And that, one of the ways is to just make the meditation very, very short, but make it very definite. You're going to sit, hold still for 3 minutes. Decide ahead of time, 4 minutes. You can handle it. Start with a bell, end with a bell, making sure it's a very strong, crisp form. So that way you can be aware of what arises during that time, and the contrast between what is arising there and what is arising in your just random situation about going to the kitchen and standing out on the back porch and looking at the lawn, or even talking to your partner or the neighbors, or talking on the phone, watching television, etc. And go ahead and put that silent and stillness there insert that some way into your life. And at the same time, you may be taking some drugs or chemicals or something from your medical or healthcare situation. I think it's just very, very complicated. But if you do a little bit of that, and if you do it daily, I think that it can possibly give you a little bit of a deeper understanding about what's happening in your mind stream, so you aren't turning the whole thing over to somebody who's an authority just because they have been through the education system and passed tests. Our education system, I don't want to get off on that tangent, but maybe some other time I'll give a talk on education. Would that be exciting?
Future Valley. Do we need to find some sort of balance between addressing a situation relatively and meditation?
It's possible. I'm highly dedicated to helping people who are having difficulty with their mind stream or with their thoughts or their emotions or what in their life. And if you know me very well, you'll see that I am pretty committed to that. So committed, I'm willing to go any direction with it. Just about. We even do a process I call deep consciousness, where it's similar to hypnosis, but it's not exactly that, because that's something I practiced off and on since the 1960s. And so it's similar to that, but it's not exactly the same thing. It's just about addressing the deeper levels of consciousness while someone is still relatively awake or conscious, to actually talk to that area of the mind stream. Some people respond very well to that. You happen to be one of them. And some people don't at all. They can't, you have no entry there, it seems. And I emphasize, it seems. But there's so many things that could be causing a what? Disturbance. You have a symptom, you have a feeling. There's just so many, it's so vast and untraceable. And several people here approach someone's difficulty, different people's difficulty in that way, to see if we can't get a little bit of relief. And quite often get a lot of relief by addressing things that don't look real. And they just don't look, it doesn't look like there was anything going on in 900 years ago. But something was happening in the mind, and it seems to register as that. So we go there and look at it. Do I believe it? No. Do I disbelieve it? No. Do I ignore it? Certainly not. And this is what I teach around the clock. Don't ignore. Don't believe it, don't disbelieve it. Those are the three poisons right there. Don't take any position on anything. Then if something is, the different facets of any given situation is slowly rotating around, which it will be, because the only way things solidify or get fixated is if you push on them. Then they fight back, and they take on a reality that you give them by your imputed authority over things. But don't do it. Just observe, observe, observe. And what you need to do next will make its appearance. I can't guarantee that, but I highly recommend that, as opposed to all the other guesswork that human beings are doing all over the world and just making things worse. Yes.
Beyond bowing, I'm trying to get at the predicament part, and what I'm,
The title of it.
yeah. What I'm wondering is, what is so important? Why is it so important to look at the very thing, we could call it depression right now, very thing that is so natural, it seems, as a totally natural and customary to just turn away from? I mean,
That's important to look at.
yeah.
Because, well, okay, I can do the predicament part. And that's why I deliberately gave it that name, because the depression, as I said, 15, 20 people all might call it that, or the doctor might call it that. But if you're having some kind of a disturbance in your mind stream that is such a, what is the conventional word, a downer, just every day, it's just terrible being alive. You don't want to be here anymore. Then excuse me, it's a predicament, because you have the negative feeling, and then some people, not everyone, but some people, it's so horrible, they just want to leave. They want to end their life. You know about that. So, and what am I supposed to say? What am I going to say? Was anybody, oh, don't leave. Well, really, it's not any of your business. So all these agencies and everything that try to keep people from taking their life. I'm not saying that's not valuable, and they shouldn't be there. Of course they should. But we really need to look really closely at what it is when someone gets so terribly depressed and so upset and so just, they want to just give up on everything by actually ending who they think they are. This is not you. These bodies are not, that's not all there is to you. And so it's a predicament in that you have this negative feeling and you want to cover it up with something, medications, you could do that. You can cover it up with lots of activity, possibly. Some people maybe can just go out and jog. They just feel better if they just jog. Is that incorrect? No, not at all. That person may jog and may feel great and may live and have their job, hold their job down, have their family, and never meditate. They might even hear about meditation and think, oh, yeah, not interested in that meditation turning into a vegetable or whatever other idea they might have. So did I get close to what the predicament part? And you don't really know what it is or what to do about it. So you turn to an authority, so-called, could be any number of people, and you kind of do what they say. And I'm saying you might want to wait a little bit on that before you just immediately go into medications. Look at it yourself for a while.
Being bowing, I'm wondering how do you find that ground or the courage to determine for yourself what it is you are looking at?
Well, sitting practice of meditation, shikantaza can help you with that if you'll do it. But I'm not here to market it or make advertisements for it. I'm here, I present a Dharma talk and people listen or they don't. We have a few dozen people listening. Don't run a big campaign and charge a lot of money. Don't charge anything. So it's, I just think it's so different with each person. Any ideas? People have been living in a monastery for a number of years. How does that look to you from the point of view of your own meditation practice, which is much stronger the last 2 years?
So I'm doing some of what you say, fitting that into my life.
Good.
And you tell me I can find my own authority, so I hope,
Okay.
I guess
Yeah.
I hope that I can.
When I say you can find your own authority, it may not look like me being in charge or you being in charge. It may not look like the conventional idea of I have my own authority. I'm going to do what I think and what I should. You might find that there is no such thing as authority. It's a misunderstanding. That's how you find your own authority. Did I mislead you there?
We'll find out.
Find out. Yes, sir.
Going. You used to quote a teacher, I think it was, who a student asked like what bliss was, and the teacher said, you might call it suffering.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, looking at depression as a predicament, is there a liberation in the depression?
There is. It takes a lot of work. But I've said this way, and I sometimes have a little bit of second thoughts about it, but then I can't really stop what I'm saying. I don't control what I say. So I have to say it this way, and it may sound a little silly. I would love to have 15 questions around this if you have them, so please don't hold back. But you won't care how you feel. You're no longer putting your own feelings and emotions and the content of your mind. You're no longer trying to change yourself into something else. No longer trying to be different. No longer trying to get rid of your anxiety or depression or anything. But that takes a while to do that. It won't happen the first 3 or 4 years of meditation. It may never happen. You may meditate the rest of your life and never awaken to your true nature. Might not happen until 3 centuries from now, or your next lifetime. More about that if you haven't. Don't hesitate.
Bowing.
Any further questions around that? Yes,
Bowing.
Junshu.
Right now, it seems like every action comes out of or is based on how I feel or think
Yes.
about something.
Yes.
If I didn't care how I felt, what would the action arise out of?
It would arise out of the situation you're in. It isn't that you would stop feeling the negativity or the difficulty or the positivity, is that it would no longer run you. This is what's referred to as a third noble truth, cessation. It's a cessation of the personhood. The dependent origination is still there. Emotions may come and may go, but you also see that they're fundamentally none of your business, yet you're feeling it. But there's no person there anymore because that has been seen through. You see that there's no solid being called me. I can't say it any more bluntly than that. And you must be able to tell just by listening to me a little bit that I'm pretty confident about that. Someone might listen to this and think I'm just full of myself and it's just a bunch of arrogance. Well, perhaps it is. It doesn't feel like that, but I wouldn't fight with anybody if they wanted to say that. Go ahead, please.
If I see that I'm acting out of my feelings, is it appropriate to try to look at the space that's showing up in?
Close, yes. That's what happens. Sitting practice, and you couldn't ask that question if you hadn't thought about that or reflected that anything that shows up, anything that appears, whether it's this kotsu or whether it's an emotion or a thought or a memory or anything, needs to have a space in which to appear, just like you can't have clouds without a sky. But the sky doesn't do anything. The clouds do all kinds of things. Sometimes they turn into hurricanes. So all kinds of things are going. The sky doesn't care what happens in it. But if you think you're a cloud, you think that your emotions, your feelings, and things that are you're identified with that part of consciousness gets snagged by that emotion or that feeling or that personal hurricane. Then we torture ourselves, we torture others, we pour medications on ourselves or try to find the right kind of meditation to make that stop. You even say that. But to just receive what this is, you see that nothing is separate from anything else. They're not separate things anywhere. So what would happen eventually, you could say it this way, there's no guarantee, but you could say that you eventually would see that any emotion that arises in your mind stream is not about you, the person. There is no you, the person. There's just consciousness, and it happens to show up in the form of Junshu, which is your Dharma name, pure appearance. And I named you that because I want you to look at that everything that appears is completely pure. There's no contamination from anything. You have to say it. If any of you have a Dharma name, contemplate your Dharma name. It's there because I'm seeing that in you, that potential in you. Well,
If we were to see the entire situation or the space around the emotions, could we still be flooded by the emotion or could we
Yes.
still act out of it?
you could still be flooded by it and you may still act out of it for a while. It may take a while. It may be very disappointing to be able to see how your emotions are not real and that they're still clobbering you. But just don't give up. Keep going. It takes a while. It takes a long time. It's very difficult to do completely by yourself, even if you have some inkling from something you've read, something you've heard. You hear that bliss, the teacher that I quoted, and I can't remember his name, said that, what is bliss? And said, well, you might call it suffering. Powerful statement of Bodhisattva.
Sokuzan, can depression or anxiety get worse on the path?
Yes. It can appear worse because through sitting practice of meditation, you're not covering it up anymore. You're actually experiencing what maybe a few years ago you might have shoved down or covered up or explained away or dismissed or blamed someone for that. And if you blame or if you fight with or if you ignore the three poisons, passion, aggression, and ignorance, whatever you are dealing with tends to back off to some extent. It does work to some extent, but it's temporary because it's circular. It goes right around, comes right back up 3 days later, maybe not for a year, but it comes back because everything is going in circles in samsara, in the relative world, relative truth, life and death, life and death, life and death. We show up and we go away. We show up, we go away. Morning, noon, and night, morning, noon, and night. The phases of the moon, everything is going in circles except the digital clock. You should throw those out quickly. Throw them in a big pile and burn them. No, you can keep them for souvenirs. Just don't plug them in. Go ahead.
Sokuzan, it sounds like you're saying if it's if depression and anxiety seem to be getting worse, it's an illusion or it's not accurate to blame the meditation. Is that right? Like
Yeah, you
it's
would,
not actually making it worse.
you might, but you wouldn't. You might do that a little bit, say that I'm meditating because the meditation is causing things to get uncovered. So I'm seeing how silly I've been or how much self-deception has been running me, thinking that this caused that, and not seeing what the conventional idea. There's the big picture of everything. You cannot find the first cause to anything. I don't care how horrible you're feeling. And if somebody right next to you has triggered that feeling, it is your feeling. It's your feeling, even depression. It's yours. When I say yours, I don't mean yours, the person, the ego, the personality. I'm saying this particular complex of nerve endings and consciousness showing up as a sense of smell, sense of taste, sense of touch, sense of seeing, sense of hearing, sense of thinking, sense of feeling, sense, receiving. You're just a big receiver. If you're producing things, then that's okay, but look closely what you're producing. This produces Dharma teachings. And that's all it produces. Well, I think I occasionally whine about things. Don't you dare grin. Question? Yes, sir.
Joe Bowing, how do we become deluded from depression?
Deluded from what?
Depression.
The delusion part there is the emotion arises, and then we, instead of receiving the emotion and letting it hit you like a bear claw in the face, like my CPAP machine, I describe that. I hate it, but I have to do it if I want to live a while longer. So it's just like something comes and sticks to you. Look at it, observe it, receive it. If it shows up on your face, it's supposed to be there, dependently arisen. And if there is a way that you can remove it, probably you will. It's very simple. But it's the struggle with what shows up, the rejection of what shows up, or the blaming, which is a form of agreement. You're saying this has only happened because of him or her or that or them, or what happened when I was 8 years old, how I was treated. Relatively, it's probably true. But we're talking about a spiritual path, not a mundane path of getting somewhere, accomplishing something. Death comes without warning. This body will be a corpse. Impermanence. This is coming. It's coming. It says so on one of my cups here. It says, what does it say? Here comes death, something like that. You're going to tell me what the cup said? You have a question? What is it?
Sokuzan, what does meditation address in something like depression or anxiety if it's not addressing a first cause or a cause?
Well, what is meditation addressing in anything to do with mind stream? Whether it's depression or whether it's passion, aggression, ignorance, pushing, pulling, jealousy, anger, all of those things. That is not addressing a first cause. You've been a monk for how many years? Count them. I'll wait.
I think it's at least 4. Usually
You're an accountant. How many?
answers.
Huh?
Usually Jay's on answers.
What he does? Well, he's not here right now. He won't be back for a couple of months yet. He's in retreat. No, wait a minute. I guess he gets out tomorrow, doesn't he? Yeah, I lied. You see what I'm saying? There is no first cause for anything. That's the very nature of suffering is human life. Life is suffering. This is the Buddha said that. He didn't say it part of the time. And people who disagree with that, it's just another way of saying, describing how much you ignore, because the world is suffering intensely everywhere. And if you're tied up with an individual person, I'm me over here, and I don't care about my neighbors. They're over there, and good luck to them. Go get a job, neighbor. I have a job. You're on welfare, whatever. We just are constantly complaining about the people in our world instead of helping them. This doesn't mean you have to give them all your money, but you could certainly put them a little bit ahead of the situation where they could get some help from you, possibly at least respect, if nothing else. Keep going.
Sokuzan, I've been working with something that occasionally shows up like depression, but it's been very strong for a couple of years now. And
Go ahead.
what does receiving that, how does receiving that work with what that is?
It works with it because it's showing up. So it is your way by receiving it. The attitude is to receive that is what you're doing where you're facing a wall. Whatever shows up on the wall, you know what shikantaza is. You can teach it. Anyone in here can teach what they've been trained to do. They might need more help to how to relate to different kinds of issues or problems. But basically, it's about sitting down, holding everything still that you can without being rigid, and watching what the mind continues to do. And just by receiving that, you're training yourself to receive everything. That's what this life is about, receiving. And if you really fundamentally receive, then anything that comes out, gave a talk, when was it, Sunday? Was it Sunday? Enlightened outflows. That means that anything you do from then on is coming out of enlightenment, not the state of mind, some fancy person who knows everything. I'm saying it comes out of the consciousness only. So what you might be doing might look funny or mistaken to someone else, but it's coming out of you, and you are no longer at war with anything, no longer at peace with anything, no longer have any position on anything. Again, and there's still a body-mind complex operating here, then you just will dance with everything. It might not look like a dance, but you don't make decisions other than something like you don't walk through a window, you walk through a door. But you could go out the window. You thinking about that? You know, we're 5 stories up, don't you?
I just think about COVID.
Yeah, Coben climbing out the window to get away from someone who's irritating you. I haven't done that yet, but it's coming. Might have to have someone help me get out the window by myself. Yes, sir.
Going. I think you use the image of receive it like a bear claw in your face.
Yes.
And this isn't clear, so I'm sorry. It feels like in the midst of that, we might think we're receiving it because we feel so bad. Like I've been feeling depressed for 6 months now. And I'm wondering if there's still something we're not receiving, even though we're feeling bad about it.
Probably. Well said. It takes a while. You can't, if you're doing there's ground path information. The ground is it just sucks. It's just painful. And a lot of people can cover that up. They won't end up in a meditation hall. They won't end up listening to this kind of a talk from a Buddhist monk, because they have other ways of dealing with it that are totally workable. My mother and father are both, I don't think they thought so, but they were both alcoholics. And that's the way they dealt with it. They just would drink. If they felt really bad, go tip a couple. We just stopped for a couple cold ones. I remember how many times I heard that when they would come home. Is it wrong? No, it's not wrong. It's just part of the culture, part of the situation. But there was no way for them that I know of, that they know of ever addressing their difficulties or other than just alcohol. And then there might be other people that are addressing their difficulties with meditation or mantras, or there's all kinds of ways of doing this. Using any structure there is, including Buddhism, you can use that to cover things up rather than uncover. That's why it's necessary if you're going to practice meditation or practice Buddhism. There's all kinds of variability here, so I'm not trying to drop the hammer on anybody. I'm just saying it might be necessary to have a teacher, somebody that you have some confidence in, if not out and out trust, to give you some feedback on what you're dealing with, what you're going through. Someone that has no agenda around you other than to not get in the way of what you need to see yourself.
Bowing. It seems impossible to not have some credential mentality or goal, like I'm going to receive this so that it'll go away.
Sure. It's just but when you get rid of that, have the credential mentality. Eventually that will turn into humility, because you'll eventually see that you're a fool. And you're not going to improve. You're not going to get any better. But since it's a spiritual path, you can actually transcend this world. You actually start to see beyond the limited view of 3 feet away and 10 feet away, and what you're hearing on CBS or and what is that? MSNBC.
Shadow bowing. So if we have the intention and we see that we're still just kind of looking for something in that's the path, or that's appropriate to do it that way. Is that what you're saying?
Paraphrase yourself. Paraphrase what you said.
Shadow bowing is the best we can do. Start again. If we have the intention to see something directly, is that enough?
Yes. Just return to the intention. It's going to feel like failure. Ego will continue to comment more than likely on your progress on the path. Like you're not doing so well, you're still just as angry now as you were 10 years ago when you started, or all kinds of I'm not saying ignore it. I'm not saying don't pay any attention to it. I'm saying listen to that and proceed. It's a dark, dark forest. It can be for some people. And sometimes that looks like something like depression. And maybe it is. Maybe before we even came in here, I talked to Ondo a little bit about that, and she mentioned that, you could have chemical imbalances going on. So I'm saying there's no hard, fast thing that everybody should meditate. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you may want to try that along with getting your getting your radiator checked. Isn't that what you're talking for? Yes. More.
Shadow bowing.
You're next. I'm talking about Tunchu. Go ahead.
When I look at my intention, sometimes it looks like I'm not really intending that. Like if I was intending, I would be trying harder, or it just looks fishy, like I'm not really intending what I'm trying to do. What?
That gets worse. The more you do this, the more you see how you're, to say it bluntly, bullshitting yourself. It's a hard one to look at. I couldn't see that until I met my Zen master, Sokuzan Roshi. And even then I couldn't see it. It took years of contemplating how he was treating me or how he was acting for me to eventually see that he could see that I was deceiving myself, pretending something that just wasn't true. It was hard, painful, embarrassing, really, really embarrassing. I'm not saying you're going to go through the same thing. I'm saying I did. I had to go through that. Yes.
It shows up for me more of a comment that when I look at trying to receive help from you, and I really look at that, it doesn't really look like I'm actually trying to receive help from you. Like there's something always.
I understand. Just keep going. Just don't stop. Stop. There's a few people things starts to show up and they start to turn the other way. It's not wrong. That's just what they do, and I don't know why they would do that, but I can't change someone's karma. They're able to do this so far, and then they don't go any further. If that's what you're in fact talking about, don't leave. Continue. Return to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. Return to the teacher, the teaching, in the community. And I mean it. All three of those. That if you leave one of those off, the whole thing seems to fall apart. So this is a 2,500-year-old algorithm. Yes.
Divine. You said that we can cover things up even through Buddhism or through medication. How would you help? How do you differentiate what someone who is a non-meditator should do versus someone who is a meditator? Bowing.
So if someone who's a meditator would be interact with the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, look at the teaching, see if there's something that addresses it in the teaching that you've been studying, work with a Sangha, if you have other people who are also practicing, talk to them somewhat, talk to the teacher about that situation. And then the other part was someone who is not a meditator, anybody on here is likely to be a meditator. I'm not saying isn't somebody who maybe doesn't practice and just listens to talks. That's possible too. And if that's you, then I say try to do some sitting still by yourself, as much as you can, so that you can begin to see so you can understand what consciousness is and what thoughts are and what memories are, because they are not the same thing, nor are they separate. That's why it's such a conundrum form. Those are good.
This is coming out of our question. How do we cover things up with Buddhism? How do we use Buddhism or the practice to cover up our?
Oh, just anything. Well, that's like quoting the teacher or something to somebody's doing this, and then just say something I would say to them. Well, Sokuzan says, don't do anything unless you have to. So you say, well, I'm not going to loan you that $100. I mean, it's a simple, silly thing, but it's like that kind of a thing. We cover it up, use the Dharma to sneak around things. Everything is empty, so you shouldn't feel bad because it's all empty. Yes.
Mozuku bowing. I'm thinking about a friend I had many years ago who was severely manic depressive,
Yes.
and the situation got pretty desperate. With your teaching of don't meddle, is there a situation where you might recommend to somebody either seeing a professional I practicing?
I think very much so. Some people might need to do that. Might need to go and see a professional or see it. We've had people in our situation who are meditators, but also have talked back and forth and thought, well, maybe you should talk to a therapist a little bit. That does show up occasionally, situationally. And especially I'm biased. I would recommend somebody who's a therapist who's also a Buddhist. And it gives you a little bit of coverage in both areas, especially with someone who's a student of mine. Don't you?
You said earlier, spend a lot of time on the cushion. How do we know if we're sitting enough?
Ask me. It's a generalization. It's like try to sit an hour a day. It's just kind of a general rounded number, and try to do a block sit a week, or at least go into retreat once a year, or 10 days, or whatever you're going to do. You're going to do a 4x4 here pretty quick, which is 4 in the morning, 4 in the afternoon, for 4 days in a row. And that's one person who's working as a family or has a situation where they can't really just leave, like Jason just did for 10 days. He went out to Shugyohan, a retreat house out in the woods, little hut, and he's there for 10 days. And Shoda was out there for 30 days recently. So it can be done. Might have to adjust things a little bit to get that to happen. Sanho's doing one over here in Twining Vines, an apartment in the building we call the Asparagus House. I think he's in his fourth day. Anyone know?
Yes.
Fourth day? Don't remember. Is it fourth? So he's in 4 days of 10 day. He's also, and his is not a strict solitary retreat, it's modified. So he's an attorney. So he's also working somewhat, but his situation is set up so that he can meditate for 4 hours, work for a few hours, then meditate for 4 hours. Isn't that how he was doing that? As I recall. So, we'll modify it to, the important thing is just to get the sitting in somewhere so that you're going to sit down, hold still, and watch get to know yourself. You get to know yourself so you know what is happening and how you might perhaps start to buy into your thought patterns in such a way that it might take more than just one 30-day retreat. You don't have to be a monk. You can do 30-day retreats without being a monk. Yes.
Are you bowing? So is there a results orientation that's when you say you may have to do more than one retreat? Are we looking for some kind of a result? Bowing?
Well, of course, we're always looking for results, but that's the relative area of the mind that wants results. We want progress, and we want, and quite often the teachings will address that. the teaches 7 days of mind training quite often. In there, if you study that material, it's looking like here's something that's you're having difficulty with, here's some kind of a antidote that you can apply that will help clear up that difficulty on the path. So it's taught relatively quite a bit. I don't do too much of that, but I do some. Excuse me, more about it if you have it.
When you're bowing, it has to do with expectation. It's
Yes,
in my experience, it's like, well,
This
things
is-
will go away if I just,
and they are.
they don't
How long have
see.
you been practicing?
Well, I met you 30 years ago. You gave me meditation instruction,
So how much of that time is spent as a strong practitioner?
probably the last 10.
Okay. So, and how's that going for you? Results?
I'm still here.
And you're still here. Well, there's a result. It's hard. It is very, very hard. So I don't mean to say that you might meditate for 8 or 10 years or 3 years or 5 years and things start to really change for you or relax or be more, life is just more accessible and you're suffering less. So that's possible, but there's no guarantee. One of the misunderstandings there is feeling like this is your only life. This is the only time this is just this life. If you're 35 years old and you have this life and you might have another 35 years to go or more. And to actually make assumptions about your life and that there's just this life. You've been here forever and all of you have. I have no proof. And I would give you proof if I had it. I'd rather you see it yourself. You have to see it yourself. Otherwise, you're just believing stuff. Don't believe anything. Don't believe anything I say. Don't believe the Buddha. Don't believe anything. You check everything out yourself. Get your own authority. And what is that? Seeing that there is no such thing. There is no solid self in the skandhas. There's no solid self anywhere. This is an incredible illusion. And it's very, very powerful, solid. Can't be pushed over. And but if you do anything with it, it pushes back or it fights back. And it is fuel for the ego, just like the failure of meditation getting us somewhere, making us more peaceful, more calm.
When you're bowing, so with your half century of this practice, did you get anywhere?
No, it's been a failure. It's not a joke. I didn't get it. Didn't get anywhere. Haven't gotten anywhere. Haven't accomplished a damn thing. How am I able to even teach? How am I able to do this? Why would there be, well, there's not hundreds or thousands, heaven forbid, but there's a couple dozen people who, when I talk, and I talk just about every day, and I invite you, come and take me apart. Do you think I'm being deceptive or bullshitting you in any way? Come and get me. Show me how I'm full of it. Or whatever.
Sokuzan, what is the failure?
The failure is the final failure, the final disappointment, seeing that there never was anybody. Your body's still here. You still do this, do that. You still pull on your ear or cross your arms, but there's no person here. There's no solid central being here. There's no central being there either. But one who is functioning as a Dharma teacher relates to people where they're at. And if someone is all gnarled up in their self-centeredness and think that they're right and other people are wrong, then that teaching person, if they have the permission of that other person as a student, begins to work with them. But I can't just tell you, stop believing in the self. Go ahead.
Sokuzan, what is it about what is it about the failure that distinguishes it as that word, as that feeling?
It's only a failure when the ego's coming apart, as Coben said, falling apart, nothing to do, everything all at once. Past and future vanished into this, everything all at once. Falling apart, his whole idea, his story, his ideas about himself, who he was, his identity, all just came apart, came untied, came unbundled. The ego fell apart because it's a construct. There is no one. And then you're left with what? A human form that you don't even know who this is. You have no idea. You no longer attribute any kind of identity to this. But other people are doing it, so you relate to them. If they're relating to you as a teacher, you function as a teacher. They relate to you as someone who came in the party store and wants to buy a gallon of milk. That's all. You're just a person buying a gallon of milk. You're not a wonderful teacher that this person might need to hear about. What a great meditation master you are. That's gone. It's gone. It's just not there. So the disappointing part happens up until the final disappointment, which is awakening itself. And after that disappointment, nothing is disappointing after that. Because it's over with. You're done for. There never was a person. You never were in prison. You've been liberated by seeing that you never were in prison. And that can be done. You can actually do that. And I also say, when I talk about this, I say, don't believe me. Don't believe what I'm saying. You find out. Go ahead.
Sokuzan, what is the failure or the falling apart if the grasping or the clinging doesn't go anywhere?
The clinging may come up and the grasping may come up. The falling apart may stop falling apart, may start falling apart. But what happens, you see that all of that is an illusion. It's unreal. So now it doesn't make any difference whether your ego shows up or not, because you see your fundamental understanding is, there's not real. There's just nothing substantial about it. So the illusion still goes on, but you're no longer deluded by it. You no longer can be frightened. You no longer can be seduced. Nobody can offer you anything and seduce you anything because you don't want anything. But the only way you would know that about someone is to try to seduce them. Try to seduce me.
You like some ice cream?
How much?
A gallon?
You got 2 gallons?
I can get some.
Okay. Chocolate.
Whatever you like.
That's her favorite flavor. I'm not going to tell you mine because I don't want you seducing. Junkie monkey. Do you follow me a little bit? But it just falls apart. Everything comes apart. It's disappointing. As long as there's any path left, it's disappointing. But once that final disappointment, the self-centeredness has collapsed, there is no longer a person. So you don't care what anybody thinks about you. I'm not saying you're kind of haughty about it. I don't care what I'll do what I want. You don't do anything like that. You just fundamentally don't care. If someone loves you, you appreciate it. You probably love them. You probably love everybody because you don't see anything else but this. You love very, very confused and commonly called terrible people because they don't have anybody. Yes, sir.
So going with that idea of, I think you said, you see no one was ever in a prison. Is the reason that that's really disappointing? Is there still an appearance of a prison?
There can be if you're still hooked on that illusion. But once you see that it's an illusion, then the jig is up. You're done for. Over with. I think we can close now. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Senshu, one of Sokuzan's monks. Sokuzan offers his wisdom tirelessly with complete love and devotion. If you value these teachings, Sokuzan, the mandala of SokukoJi, please consider donating at sokukoji.org. Thank you.